I took my time, chewing each bite with purpose. The turkey tasted better than I remembered, the mashed potatoes richer. My eyes wandered to the empty space at the table where my wife would have sat. She'd passed away 2 years ago, but her absence still felt as sharp as it had on the day we buried her. Maybe sharper, in fact, because now it felt like I was surrounded by strangers, not family. Derek, oblivious, continued tapping away at his phone. Kayla had stopped laughing and was now scrolling through her own device, the glow from their screens casting an eerie light over the table. I wondered if they even noticed the silence, the weight in the air, or if they were just too busy with their little lives to care. Jenna picked at her food again. Her gaze flicked up briefly, meeting mine with that same look. It was the same look she'd given me for years, a mix of annoyance and something darker, something more entitled. She never appreciated anything I did for her, always expecting more. She'd gone through the phases of needing me, but now she was in the phase where I was just an ATM in human form, a means to her ends. "Are you going to eat that?" she asked, pointing to my mashed potatoes, as if I was obligated to share even the smallest morsel with her. I shook my head. "No, you can have it." She scooped the potatoes onto her plate without saying thank you, not even a glance in my direction. Brad's hand remained firmly on hers, like some kind of signal. She was his project now, his responsibility. Funny, considering how little he actually contributed. I looked down at my phone, hoping for some distraction. The message from Jim earlier echoed in my mind. "Done. Sorry to hear it came to this." I wasn't sorry. Jim would understand. He knew what I'd been dealing with. They'd all taken me for granted, every last one of them. I let the seconds stretch, the air between us thickening with the silence. I could feel my own heartbeat in my chest, slow and steady, as if in defiance of the chaos around me. Maybe it was time for me to step away, for good this time. "So," I said, after another long stretch of silence, "you all planning on paying me back anytime soon?" The question hung in the air, unnervingly direct. They all paused, looking at me like I was the one who had suddenly broken the rules. Jenna's face tightened. She set her fork down, her voice barely above a whisper. "Dad, not now." "Not now," I repeated, my voice calm, almost too calm. "When? When's the right time? I've been waiting 3 years for you to pay me back, and I haven't gotten a dime." Brad shifted in his seat. He opened his mouth like he was about to say something, but he quickly closed it again. The tension in his face said it all. He didn't care, not about me, not about the money, and certainly not about anything other than his own comfort. I had worked my ass off for everything I had, and for what? So they could live off me and my hard work while they ignored the sacrifices I'd made for them. "Look," I continued, still holding eye contact with Jenna. "You owe me. You don't get to just sweep it under the rug because you're uncomfortable." She scowled, pushing her plate away. I said not now. This is supposed to be a holiday. "A holiday," I laughed, and there it was. The tension finally snapped. "A holiday is what you want it to be, isn't it? All the fun, none of the responsibility. No, we're not going to pretend this is just a nice little dinner where we act like everything's fine. You owe me, Jenna. Don't think I'll just let it slide." Jenna opened her mouth, but I cut her off before she could speak. "No, don't say it," I said, holding up a hand. "I've heard enough of your excuses." I stood up, walking toward the kitchen without another word. The chair scraped back noisily, and I could hear the soft shuffle of footsteps behind me. They all followed, each of them unsure of what to do, like a pack of animals unsure whether to flee or stand their ground. I grabbed a glass from the cabinet and poured myself a drink, the whiskey burning as it slid down my throat. I was already regretting this entire evening, regretting the fact that I'd even bothered to invite them over. I'd been holding on to the hope that maybe, just maybe, things would change, but deep down, I knew they never would. "Dad," Derek's voice cut through the quiet, I turned to face him. Can we talk about this later? I met his eyes for the first time all night. His face was flushed, his eyes nervous. No, Derek, I said, my voice low. This can't wait any longer. Kayla stepped forward, her heels clicking on the tile floor. You don't have to do this, she said, her tone soft, almost pleading. But there was something in her eyes, a hint of calculation, of something more sinister. I don't have to do this, I asked, incredulous. You don't get to tell me what I do or don't have to do, Kayla. She flinched, then quickly recovered. I just think we should keep the peace, she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. You know, for the sake of the family. Family? I scoffed. What family? This isn't a family. It's a collection of people who've been taking advantage of me for years. Don't talk to me about family. I've given you all everything, and all I've gotten in return is this. Disrespect, greed, and silence when I need you most. Jenna had followed me into the kitchen now. You're making a scene, she said, her voice sharp. You're embarrassing yourself. I turned to her. I'm not the one who's embarrassed, Jenna. I'm not the one who's been taking from you and pretending nothing's wrong. I've given you everything, and I'm done. I'm done. Her eyes flashed with something darker, something cold. So that's it, huh? She said, her voice rising. You're cutting us all off. I nodded. Yes, it's over. I'm done. The room went still again, the only sound the hum of the refrigerator. I could feel their eyes on me, burning, each of them waiting for me to flinch, to back down. But I wasn't going to. I turned to the sink and began washing the glass, the sound of the running water filling the room. I wasn't going to engage in their petty games anymore. I'd given them my love, my money, my time, and this was how they repaid me. It was time to put an end to the cycle. I've made up my mind, I said, my back still to them. I want you all to leave. Now. The silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. No one moved, no one said anything. Finally, Derek muttered something about how, we can't do this now. But the tone was different this time, hesitant, unsure. I turned, meeting his gaze head-on. No, it's happening now. They gathered their things slowly, reluctantly, with none of the urgency that had been in their voices earlier. Kayla glanced back at me once, but she didn't say anything. Jenna walked out of the kitchen without another word, her shoulders stiff. When the last of them was gone, when the door closed behind them with a soft click, I finally allowed myself to exhale. It was done. I stood there for a long time, looking at the empty dining room. The table, the plates, the leftover food. All of it felt alien now, a reminder of everything I'd lost. But it didn't hurt as much as it used to, because now, for the first time in years, I could breathe. The call came at 7:14 in the morning. I was drinking coffee on my apartment balcony, watching the city wake up. After the divorce 5 years ago, I'd moved into this place. 1,200 square feet, 12th floor, view of the river. Sarah had kept the house. Fair enough. She'd also kept her dignity, which was more than I could say for the kids. Dad, what the hell did you do? Jenna's voice cracked through the speaker. I held the phone away from my ear. Good morning to you too. Don't good morning me. My card got declined at the grocery store. Do you know how humiliating that is? I sipped my coffee. It had gone lukewarm. No, I don't. Tell me. This isn't funny. Derek's card too. And Brad tried his and it worked, thank God. But why are you trying to ruin my life? I'm not trying to ruin anything. I'm just stopping the funding of it. Silence. I could hear her breathing, fast and shallow. You can't do this. I already did. I'll sue you. For what? Closing my own credit cards. More silence. Then, you're a vindictive old man. Mum was right about you. She hung up. I finished my coffee and went inside to get ready for work. The garage where I worked was 30 minutes across town, in the industrial district where everything smelled like oil and old rubber. I'd taken the job 2 years ago, after the kids had slowly squeezed me out of my own company. They'd used the clause in the partnership agreement, The one I'd stupidly included about mandatory retirement at 55. I'd meant it as a joke. They'd meant it as an exit strategy. "Morning, old-timer," Ray said when I walked in. He was bent over the engine of a '68 Mustang, his hands black with grease. "Morning. You look different. Win the lottery?" "Something like that." I clocked in and got to work on an oil change for a Honda Civic. Routine work, mindless. It gave me time to think. The business had been mine for 22 years. Import-export, mostly electronics and machinery parts. Nothing glamorous, but steady. I'd built it from a laptop in my basement to a company with 40 employees and 7-figure annual revenue. Then, I'd made the mistake of listening to my lawyer. "Put it in a trust," he'd said. "Name your kids as beneficiaries. It'll save on estate taxes." What he didn't say was that it would also give them voting rights. What he didn't say was that my son would develop a taste for expensive watches, and my daughter would decide the company needed fresh direction. What he didn't say was that I'd come home one day to find the locks changed on my own office. My phone buzzed in my pocket. "Derek this time. We need to talk." "So talk." "Not on the phone. Come by the house tonight." "Your house or the company office?" "Dad, because technically one of those is mine. Was mine. 7 o'clock. Our place." He hung up before I could answer. I went back to draining oil, but my hands were steadier than they'd been in months. The drive back was quiet, the hum of the engine a steady background to my thoughts. I felt lighter, but there was also a bitterness settling in, an unease I couldn't shake. The cold air had been sharp against my skin, a reminder that the world wasn't quite as warm as I'd once imagined it to be. I hadn't expected Derek to understand, or Kayla, or anyone else, but I'd expected more from myself. More clarity. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the house was dark. I didn't bother to turn on the porch light. It had been over a year since my wife passed, and the house still felt too big, too quiet, even though I'd never lived here alone before. As I walked through the door, I felt a familiar sense of emptiness, the space around me stretching farther than it should. I dropped my keys on the kitchen counter and stood there for a moment, listening to the silence, letting it settle over me. The place didn't feel like home anymore. Maybe it hadn't for a while. The phone buzzed again. "Derek." I picked it up, stared at the screen for a moment, then set it back down. I wasn't ready to talk to him. Hell, I wasn't even sure I ever would be again. I wandered through the living room, flicking on the lights one by one, the glow from the lamps casting long shadows against the walls. Everything here was so still, so permanent. I should have sold it years ago, but I hadn't. My wife had wanted to keep it, and so I had. I'd thought it would be something for the kids, a place they'd come back to, but it hadn't worked out like that. The fire in the fireplace was low, embers fading into orange-red shadows. I pulled up a chair, watching the light flicker, and for the first time, I felt completely and utterly alone. The thought of what had just happened at Derek's house didn't sit right in my stomach. It wasn't just about the money, or the business. It was about respect. It was about the fact that I had poured everything into them, and now I was just an inconvenience. I walked into the kitchen, opened the fridge, and pulled out a bottle of bourbon. I hadn't been drinking much lately, but tonight felt different. It felt like I needed it. I poured myself a glass, watching the amber liquid swirl as I raised it to my lips. The warmth spread through me, calming the rough edges of my mind. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hand absent-mindedly tracing the edge of the wood. For a moment, I thought about what it would be like to just leave it all behind. The house, the business, the kids. Maybe I'd pack up and disappear, find somewhere small and quiet. Somewhere no one would find me, no one would ask for anything. I took another drink, letting the thought linger. The problem with that idea was that I couldn't just walk away, no matter how badly I wanted to. I was tethered to this place, to these people, to the decisions I had made. The phone buzzed again. Derek. This time I answered. What do you want? I asked, my voice tight. Dad, Derek started, his voice lower than it had been earlier. We need to talk. This isn't over. I think it is. No, it's not. You're making a huge mistake. You've been angry for a long time, but cutting us off isn't going to fix anything. Maybe I'm not trying to fix anything. I could hear the sigh on the other end of the line. Look, we can't just pretend nothing's wrong. You've been holding this grudge forever, and it's time you let it go. Let it go? I laughed, the sound bitter in my throat. You've been taking from me for years, Derek. Not just money, but my time, my energy. And now I'm supposed to just let it go. You're being unreasonable. I'm your son. I don't know why you're punishing me for what happened with the business. Punishing you? I snapped. You're punishing me, Derek. You and your wife. You've got everything you need, and still, you want more. That's not true. Really? I said, standing up, pacing now. You took the company from me, Derek. You took it and sold it to the highest bidder. You think I don't know what happened? You think I don't know how you used my money to pay for it? He was silent for a moment, and in that silence I heard the truth. You're still angry about that, Derek said finally. You're damn right I am. I hung up the phone without saying goodbye, without waiting for him to say anything else. I wasn't interested in hearing his excuses anymore. It was done. He could say what he wanted, but it wasn't going to change anything. I wasn't going to change anything. I sat back down at the kitchen table, the glass of bourbon now empty in front of me. I could feel the warmth spread through my chest, a slow, almost comforting sensation. Maybe I should have felt bad for hanging up on him, for pushing him away, but I didn't. Not anymore. I closed my eyes for a moment, the memories of the past few years flashing in my mind, the long hours at the office, the missed dinners, the countless sacrifices I'd made. And where had it gotten me? Nothing but a house full of resentment and a family that didn't care. I stood up again, this time walking out to the back porch. The night air was cold, but it felt good against my skin. I leaned against the railing, staring at the stars above. Maybe this was how it was supposed to be. Maybe this was the way forward. Alone. I had spent so much of my life trying to build something for others that I had forgotten to build anything for myself. Maybe now it was time to do that. The wind rustled through the trees, and I listened to the sound for a while, letting it soothe me. The decision had been made. It had to be. They were never going to change, and I couldn't keep pretending that things were going to get better. I glanced at my phone again. Another message from Derek. Another attempt to get me to reconsider. I deleted it, just like I'd deleted everything else. The world was quieter now, the weight of it lighter. 4 months passed, 4 months of silence from the kids, which suited me fine. I worked my shifts at the garage, saved my money, and slept better than I had in years. Then the invitation arrived. Cream-colored cardstock, raised lettering. Derek and Kayla were renewing their vows. The ceremony would be held at the Riverside Hotel, the fancy one downtown, with the crystal chandeliers and the $100-a-plate buffet. Black tie required. I almost threw it away. Then I saw the note scribbled at the bottom in Kayla's handwriting. Family expected to attend, no exceptions. I called Derek. He answered on the first ring. You got the invitation. I did. Why? Because you're still my father. Because Kayla thinks we should give you another chance. How generous of her. Are you coming or not? I thought about it, really thought about it. The old me would have said no, would have avoided the conflict. But the old me was gone, buried somewhere between that Thanksgiving dinner and the moment I'd walked out of Derek's house. I'll be there, I said. The ceremony was scheduled for 3 o'clock on a Saturday. I rented a tux, polished my shoes, and showed up 15 minutes early. The ballroom was already half full, maybe 70 or 80 people milling around in formal wear, holding champagne flutes and making small talk. I recognized some faces, business associates mostly. People who used to work for me, who now reported to Derek and Jenna. They nodded politely and kept their distance. The ceremony itself was brief. Derek and Kayla stood at the front of the room, holding hands, reciting vows they'd clearly written themselves. Lots of talk about partnership and trust, and building a future together. I stood in the back row and didn't clap. The reception followed immediately. The lights dimmed, music started playing, and servers appeared with trays of food. I found a seat at a table near the corner, as far from the action as possible. Jenna approached after about 20 minutes. She wore a dark blue dress, her hair swept up, diamonds at her throat. "Glad you could make it," she said. "Wouldn't miss it. We need to talk. About the apartment." Here we go, I thought. What about it? Brad and I have been looking at places. We found a great 2-bedroom in the Pearl District, but we're a little short on the deposit. How short? 10,000. I leaned back in my chair. And you want me to give it to you? Well, yes, that's what family does. Is it? Because last I checked, family pays back their loans. Her smile tightened. I'm working on that. Working on it, right, for 3 years now. This is different. This is a good investment. No, I said. It's not. What? I said no. Find your own money. Her face went red. You're still mad about Thanksgiving. I'm not mad. I'm just done being your bank. She opened her mouth to respond, but Kayla appeared beside her. The two of them exchanged a glance, some silent communication I wasn't privy to. We need the apartment keys, Kayla said. What? Your apartment, the one you're renting. Derek told me about it. We've decided it would be perfect for Brad and Jenna while they're house hunting. I stared at her. You want my apartment? We'd compensate you, of course. First month's rent, maybe. Maybe. Probably. We'll work it out. 100 people in the room, and the noise of them faded to nothing. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and steady. No, I said. Kayla's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? I said no, it's my apartment, I'm living in it. But we need it, and you have the space. No. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a hiss. You're being selfish. Probably. Give me the keys. Not happening. Her hand moved so fast I barely saw it coming. The slap caught me across the left cheek, a sharp crack that echoed despite the music. The conversations around us stopped. Heads turned. Someone gasped. I sat there, my face stinging, looking up at Kayla's furious expression. Jenna stood behind her, mouth open in shock. Derek pushed through the crowd, his face red. What the hell is going on? Your father, Kayla started. Refused to give up his own apartment, I finished, and your wife decided violence was the answer. Dad, maybe if you'd just listen. I'm done listening. I stood up slowly, keeping my eyes on Kayla. She didn't back down. Tough woman. I'd give her that. Stupid but tough. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, saw the name on the screen. Tom. I answered. Yes? One man will come, the voice said, exactly as we'd rehearsed. Then he hung up. I looked at Kayla, at Derek, at Jenna. The entire room had gone silent now, everyone watching. You might want to check the door, I said. Derek frowned. What? The ballroom doors opened. Tom stepped inside. He was a big man, 6'3", maybe 240. He wore a dark suit that fit too well to be rented. His face was scarred across the left cheek, an old wound that gave him a permanent scowl. He scanned the room until his eyes found mine, then nodded once. He walked toward our table. People moved out of his way. Mr. Patterson, he said when he reached us. We good? We're good. Who the hell is this? Derek demanded. Tom, I said. An old friend. We did business together years ago, before you knew what business was. Tom smiled. It wasn't friendly. Heard there was a problem here. Nothing I can't handle. You sure? Because I got time. Kayla had backed up 3 steps. Jenna had disappeared into the crowd. Derek stood there, trying to look tough and failing badly. Actually, I said, I think I'm done here. Tom, you mind walking me out? My pleasure. We left together, Tom clearing a path through the crowd, like Moses parting the sea. No one said a word. No one tried to stop us. Outside, the air was cold and clean. Tom lit a cigarette. You didn't have to come, I said. Yeah, I did. You called in the favor. Still, I appreciate it. He shrugged. We're square now. But hey, you ever need anything else, you let me know. I will. He clapped me on the shoulder and walked away, disappearing into the parking lot. I stood there for a moment, letting the adrenaline drain away, then headed to my car. My phone rang before I got there. Derek. That was a mistake, he said when I answered. Which part? All of it. You embarrassed us. You brought some thug to my wedding. Renewal ceremony. And he's not a thug. He's a business associate. I don't care what he is. You crossed a line. Funny, I was thinking the same thing when Kayla slapped me. Silence. We're done, Dad. Don't call us. Don't come around. We're finished. Derek. He hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, looking at the hotel entrance. Through the glass doors, I could see the reception continuing, people dancing and laughing like nothing had happened. Good, I thought. Let them laugh. I got in my car and drove home. 3 weeks later, I got a letter. It came to the apartment, hand-delivered by a process server who made me sign for it. Legal-size envelope, law firm return address. I knew what it was before I opened it. The kids were suing me. Breach of oral contract, tortious interference. Something about emotional distress. They wanted $200,000 plus legal fees. I sat down at my kitchen table and read it twice. Then I called Robert. Robert Wright had been my business partner for 8 years, back in the early days. We'd started the import business together, built it from nothing into something real. Then I'd bought him out, paid him fair value, and we'd gone our separate ways. That was 15 years ago. We hadn't spoken in 12. Hello? His voice was older, rougher. Robert, it's me. Long pause. Well, damn, didn't expect to hear from you. I need help. Do you now? Not money, information, contacts, maybe a little strategy. Why should I help you? Fair question. Because you said once that if I ever needed anything, I should call. I'm calling. Another pause. Meet me tomorrow. Red's Diner on 5th, noon. He hung up before I could thank him. Red's Diner was exactly what it sounded like. Old booths, laminate tables, coffee that could strip paint. Robert sat in the back corner, working on a plate of eggs and hash browns. He'd gained weight, lost hair, but his eyes were the same, sharp, missing nothing. I slid into the booth across from him. You look like hell, he said. Thanks. What kind of trouble are you in? I told him everything. The company, the kids, the lawsuit, the wedding, Tom, all of it. He listened without interrupting, occasionally nodding or grunting around bites of food. When I finished, he pushed his empty plate aside and leaned back. Your kids are idiots, he said. Harsh. True. They pushed out the one person who knew how to run that business. What's the revenue now? Down 40% from last year. There you go. Give them another 2 years, maybe 3, and they'll run it into the ground. That doesn't help me now. No, but it's satisfying to think about. He sipped his coffee. What do you want from me? I want them to understand what they did. I want them to feel it. Revenge. Justice. Same thing, really. He studied me across the table. You know I'm not your friend anymore, right? We haven't been for a long time. I know. So why would I help you? Because it'll hurt them. And you always liked hurting people who deserved it. He smiled. First real emotion I'd seen from him. You remember that, huh? I remember a lot. All right, I'll help, but I want something in return. Name it. 10% of whatever you get back, and I mean everything. Money, property, business assets, all of it. That's steep. Take it or leave it. I thought about it for maybe 5 seconds. Deal. We shook hands across the table. His grip was still strong. First thing, he said, we need to understand what you actually own. You signed over the company, but what else is there? The building. I kept the commercial property. They lease it from me. Good. What are the lease terms? 5-year agreement, up for renewal next month. Perfect. Don't renew. Bump the rent triple and make it month to month. They'll never agree to that. Exactly. They'll have to move. Do you know what that costs? Moving a business, new permits, new signage, lost productivity. It'll bleed them dry. I felt something shift in my chest. Not quite hope, but close. What else? I asked. The lawsuit. Have you responded yet? My lawyer filed a motion to dismiss. Fire your lawyer. Get someone aggressive. Someone who'll counter-sue for malicious prosecution. Make it hurt. We spent another hour going through details. By the time we finished, I had pages of notes and a plan that actually made sense. One more thing, Robert said as we stood to leave. That friend of yours, Tom, he's still available? Depends. Why? We might need him, not for violence, for presence. Sometimes that's enough. I'll ask. Robert dropped a 20 on the table and headed for the door. I caught up with him in the parking lot. Why are you really doing this? I asked. He turned, squinting in the sunlight. Because your kids remind me of every entitled punk I've ever met. And because you called. That took guts. Or desperation. Same thing. He climbed into his truck. I'll be in touch. Start documenting everything. I mean everything. Texts, emails, phone calls. It all matters. He drove off, leaving me standing there with my notes and a plan that felt both terrifying and necessary. The days blurred together as the legal battle raged on. I'd never been the kind of person to get wrapped up in paperwork and technicalities, but now it felt like I was wading through a swamp. Each piece of correspondence, each phone call, each email, pulling me deeper into a mess of lies, betrayal, and petty grudges. The lease had been a win, but I wasn't done yet. I wasn't going to let them walk away without paying for what they'd done. Derek, Jenna, and their lawyer tried to call constantly, leaving messages I ignored. There was no urgency in their voices anymore, just resignation. They knew I wouldn't back down, and for once I was at peace with that. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I was trying to get justice. I had earned every cent of what I was demanding. It was a month later when I finally got the settlement offer. It came as a letter, certified mail again, the kind of thing that always felt a little too formal for family. The kids were offering $100,000, a fraction of what I had asked for. I threw it into the trash, not even bothering to read the fine print. They thought they could buy me off. I didn't want money. What I wanted was respect, acknowledgement, and for them to realize just how much they'd taken from me. But I couldn't explain that to them. Not when they were so wrapped up in their own world. They didn't get it. They didn't understand how much they had hurt me, how much they had taken from me. They had just assumed I would always be there, an ATM, a backup plan, a cushion for when things went wrong. I had given everything, my time, my energy, my life. And for what? The days were long, but there was a certain kind of satisfaction in knowing I was finally in control. The house was quiet now, the emptiness less oppressive. I'd taken steps to sever every tie, to lock down every last bit of what they had left me with. There was a sense of liberation in that. I wasn't worried about the future. For the first time in years, I was free to make my own decisions, to focus on myself, on what I wanted from the rest of my life. It wasn't much. A small piece of peace, but it was mine. Patricia called me one evening after hours. "We've got them cornered," she said, her voice brisk. "They don't have much left to play with." I took a slow breath, leaning back in my chair. What's the plan? We're moving forward with the fraud claim. If they want to settle, we'll entertain an offer, but we're not going lower than 300. I felt my heart rate slow, a rush of relief washing over me. I'll take it, I said, surprising even myself. It felt good to say it. It felt final. Patricia was quiet for a moment. You sure? I thought you were holding out for more. I don't care about more anymore, I said. I just want it to end. And end it did. A week later, they agreed. The deal wasn't as big as I had hoped, but it was enough. The money would come in, and it would be my last reminder of everything they had taken from me. The next few months passed in a blur. I spent the time doing things I hadn't done in years, walking around the neighborhood, going to small cafes, talking to strangers. For a while, I didn't feel like a father or a businessman or a man with a past. I just felt like a guy, figuring out the next chapter of his life, and maybe that's what I needed all along. I kept my distance from Derek and Jenna. I didn't call them. They didn't call me. The occasional message would come through, usually from Derek's lawyer, trying to smooth things over. But I ignored it. It wasn't that I didn't miss them. I did, in a way. But I couldn't go back to what we had. Not after everything. And as time passed, I realized that they had made their choices, and so had I. The space between us had widened, and it didn't seem like there was any way to close it. Robert called one evening, his voice low and thoughtful. You doing okay? He asked. I let the question hang in the air for a moment before I answered. I'm fine. Better than I was, anyway. That's good to hear. I know it's been rough on you, but I think you made the right call. Sometimes you've got to take a step back. You were right about Patricia. She's a force. Robert chuckled. I told you, she doesn't let anyone walk all over her, not even family. I'll say, I don't think they were prepared for that. I leaned back in my chair, my fingers drumming against the armrest. It's strange, you know? I thought I'd feel worse about all this, but I don't. I feel relieved. That's because you finally did what was best for you, Robert said, his voice firm. You're not their punching bag anymore. You're free. I smiled at the thought. Yeah, free. Just don't forget you've got friends, all right? Don't isolate yourself too much. People care about you. I didn't say anything for a long time, but in that silence, I understood what Robert was saying, and I promised myself I'd try. It was early one morning when I found the message from Jenna. It wasn't a call, not this time, just a short text. I'm sorry. I don't know what happened, but I was wrong. I didn't mean for it to get this way. Can we talk? I stared at the screen for a long time, my finger hovering over the keyboard. What do you want to talk about? I didn't know what I was expecting. Maybe an apology, maybe an explanation. But whatever it was, I didn't get it. She didn't reply for hours, and when she finally did, the message was brief. I just want things to be okay between us again. I don't want to hate each other. I put the phone down, staring out the window at the grey sky. Maybe that's what she wanted. Maybe she was just tired of the anger. I didn't know. But I did know this. I had given them everything I could, and if they wanted something different, they would have to prove it. I wasn't going to be the one to make the first move. Not this time. And with that, I let the message sit unanswered. I found Jenna at a coffee shop in the Pearl District. She sat by the window, working on a laptop, a half-empty latte beside her. She looked tired. Good. I bought my own coffee and sat down across from her without asking. Dad, what are you doing here? We need to talk. I have nothing to say to you. That's fine. Listen instead. She started to close her laptop, but I put my hand over it. You know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. We're restructuring. You're hemorrhaging money. You've lost 3 major clients in 6 months. Your operating costs are through the roof because neither of you knows how to negotiate a supplier contract. That's not... I saw the quarterly reports. Derek left them in the conference room last time I was there for the lease signing. 42% revenue loss year over year. How long before you're insolvent? A year? Less? Her face had gone pale. You don't know what you're talking about. I built that company. I know exactly what I'm talking about. She grabbed her laptop and stood up. I'm leaving. Sit down. Something in my voice made her stop. Not quite anger, not quite threat, something harder. She sat. Here's what's going to happen, I said. You're going to drop the lawsuit, all of it, and you're going to pay me back the $42,000 you owe me, $5,000 a month until it's done. We can't afford that. Sell something, cut expenses, figure it out. You wanted to run the business. This is what running a business looks like. This is blackmail. This is consequences. There's a difference. She stared at me, her eyes wet but refusing to cry. I'd give her credit for that. I hate you, she whispered. I know, but you'll pay me anyway. I stood up and left her there. My hands were shaking when I got to the car, but my mind was clear. 2 days later, their lawyer filed to dismiss the lawsuit. Patricia called me at work, triumphant. They folded. All of it. Every claim. With prejudice. They can't refile. And the countersuit. I'm pushing forward. They'll either settle or we go to trial. Let me know when they're ready to talk. I hung up and went back to work on a transmission rebuild. Ray watched me from across the shop floor. You're smiling, he said. Am I? Like a lunatic. What happened? Nothing, just a good day. But he was right. I was smiling. And it felt good. Settlement negotiations began in June. We met at Patricia's office, a glass tower downtown with views of the entire city. Derek and Jenna sat on one side of the conference table with their lawyer. I sat on the other with Patricia and Robert. Let's keep this civil, their lawyer said. Mitchell Kane, expensive suit, expensive watch, expensive dental work. The kind of lawyer who thought intimidation meant talking louder than everyone else. We're here to settle, Patricia said. Our terms are simple. Full repayment of all loans, transfer of company shares back to my client, fair compensation for his forced buyout, and a formal apology. Mitchell laughed. Actually laughed. You can't be serious. Completely serious. Your client sold his shares voluntarily. He was paid fair market value. Fair market value as determined by whom? His children, who had a vested interest in lowballing him. This is ridiculous. Patricia leaned forward. What's ridiculous is your clients thinking they could steal a company from the man who built it and face no consequences. Derek spoke up. We didn't steal anything. You changed the locks while he was on vacation. You froze his access to company accounts. You forced him out using a retirement clause he never intended to invoke. What would you call it? Business? Bad business, I said. Everyone looked at me. And expensive business, as you're learning. Jenna's voice was quiet. What do you want from us? Everything I just said, plus the building. You're going to sign it back over to me. We can't do that, Derek said. Then we go to trial. Patricia will subpoena every document, every email, every text message. She'll put your clients on the stand and make them explain exactly how they forced you out. How do you think that plays to a jury? Mitchell looked at Derek and Jenna. They had a silent conversation, the kind only siblings can have. We need to discuss this privately, Mitchell said. Take your time, Patricia said. We're not going anywhere. They left the conference room. We sat there in silence for maybe 10 minutes. Robert checked his phone. Patricia reviewed her notes. I looked out the window at the city I'd spent 3 decades building a life in. When they came back, Derek looked older somehow, defeated. We'll agree to most of it, Mitchell said. The loans, the apology, but not the company shares. All or nothing, Patricia said. That's not reasonable. Neither is slapping someone at their son's wedding. Neither is suing your father for trying to get his money back. We're past reasonable. Mitchell turned to me. You really want to destroy them? I want what's mine, I said. Nothing more, nothing less. Another silent conversation between the siblings. This one lasted longer. Finally, Jenna said, "Fine, take it all." "Jenna," Derek started. "No, he's right. We screwed up. We thought we could run it better, but we can't." Derek looked at her like she'd betrayed him. Maybe she had, but she was also the only one in the room being honest. "Draft the papers," I said to Patricia. "I want this done by end of week." Mitchell gathered his documents. "This is a mistake. You'll regret this." "I've made lots of mistakes," I said. "This isn't one of them." They left. Robert poured 3 glasses of water from the pitcher on the table and slid one to me. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Empty. Full." "I don't know." "That's normal." Patricia was already typing on her laptop, drafting the settlement agreement. "I'll have this to you tomorrow for review. Assuming everyone signs, we can close by Friday." "Good." Robert and I left together. In the parking garage, he stopped beside his truck. "You got what you wanted," he said. "Company's yours again. They're paying back the money. You won." "Doesn't feel like winning." "It never does. That's how you know it mattered." He opened the truck door. "My 10%. Don't forget." "I won't." "Good, because next time you need help, it'll cost 20. He drove away, leaving me standing there in the dim light of the garage, keys in hand, victory tasting like ash. Friday came. We signed the papers at a notary's office, nobody speaking more than necessary. Derek signed first, his hand shaking slightly. Jenna signed next, not looking at me. I signed last, my signature firm and clear. The company was mine again. The building was mine. The debts were acknowledged, payment plans established. Everything I'd built, stolen and reclaimed, all documented in legal language and witnessed signatures. "That's everything," the notary said. "You're all set." Nobody moved for a moment. Then Derek stood and walked out without a word. Jenna followed. Their lawyer gathered his papers and left. I sat there with Patricia, the silence heavy. "You should feel good about this," she said. "Should I?" "You stood up for yourself. You fought back. Most people don't." "Most people don't have to fight their own children." She didn't have an answer for that. We left the office together, stepping out into a bright summer afternoon that felt wrong somehow, too cheerful for the occasion. I drove to the business. My business. It was in a brick building near the industrial district, 3 floors, parking lot out front. I'd bought it 20 years ago when the neighborhood was rough. Now it was gentrifying, coffee shops and microbreweries moving in. The building was worth 5 times what I'd paid. I used my key, they'd never changed that lock, and went inside. The reception area was empty, desk clean, computer off. I climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor where the offices were. Derek's office still had his nameplate on the door. I pushed it open. The desk was clear, everything personal removed. Same with Jenna's office next door. They'd cleaned out fast. I went to what used to be my office. A kid I didn't recognize sat at the desk, maybe 25, working on a laptop. "Help you?" he asked. "I'm the owner. Who are you?" "Sam, sales coordinator." "Wait, did Derek sell the company?" "Something like that. Take the rest of the day off, Sam. Paid. Come back Monday." "Seriously?" "Seriously." He packed up his laptop and left, confusion written all over his face. I sat down at the desk and looked around. The office was different. They'd repainted, changed the furniture, hung different art on the walls. Nothing of mine remained except the view from the window. I pulled out my phone and called the office manager, Linda. She'd worked for me for 12 years before the kids took over. "Mr. Patterson?" She sounded shocked. Derek said, "I own the company again, Linda. Can you come in Monday? We need to talk about operations." Silence. Then, "You really got it back?" "I really got it back." "Thank God, things have been a nightmare. Derek's been cutting staff, Jenna keeps changing the pricing structure. We lost the Yamamoto account last week." I know. We'll fix it. Monday, 8 o'clock. I'll be there. I hung up and sat in the quiet office, listening to the building settle around me. 22 years I'd poured into this place. 2 years I'd been gone. Now I was back, but it felt different, smaller somehow, or maybe I was different. My phone buzzed. Robert. You at the office? Yeah. How's it feel? Strange, like visiting a museum of my own life. Give it time. You'll remember why you loved it. Maybe. Hey, I'm collecting my 10% next week, just so you know. I remember. Good. Pleasure doing business with you. Again. He hung up. I stayed in the office until the sun started setting, then locked up and drove home. The next day, I made my way to Red's Diner just before noon. The place was one of those old-school establishments that hadn't changed in decades. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, a red and chrome counter, and waitresses who knew the menu by heart without ever needing to write anything down. It felt like the kind of place you'd meet someone for a drink at 3 a.m. after the world had gone to shit. I spotted Tom immediately. He was sitting at the far booth, a cup of coffee in front of him. His broad frame took up more space than the booth should have allowed, and his dark hair was more salt than pepper these days, though his posture was still the same, leaning forward, elbows on the table, ready to make his move. He looked up as I approached and nodded, his face a little softer than it used to be, but that same edge was there, lurking underneath. Hey, I said, sliding into the booth across from him. Good to see you, Tom replied. I figured you'd show up. He gave me a half smile. You always were a man of your word. I didn't respond. He already knew I was. That was the thing with Tom. He understood more than most people, and that could be either a blessing or a curse. But I knew better than to expect any grand pleasantries or small talk. Tom got straight to business. You got the company back, he said, leaning in. Good for you. Yeah, I did, I said, scanning the menu but not really seeing it. Thanks for the tip. I'm still figuring out how to move forward, though. Tom chuckled. That's how it always goes, right? But you're back in the game now, and you're making waves. Can't say I'm surprised. You've always been good at that. Thanks, I said, then paused, studying him. What's this about? You don't call me out of nowhere just to pat me on the back. Tom took a sip of his coffee, his eyes narrowing slightly. I got a proposition for you. Not the kind of thing you hear every day, but it's legal, I promise. I raised an eyebrow. Legal, huh? Last time we talked, you were crossing lines I didn't even know existed. Yeah, well, I've cleaned up my act, he said, with a mockingly innocent smile. No more under-the-table deals. No more shady business. This one's all above board. I wasn't convinced, but I had learned long ago that Tom's idea of above board was probably just legal enough to avoid serious consequences. Still, he'd always been a loyal friend, and in some way, that counted for more than the usual rules. So, what's the deal? I asked. Tom leaned in, his voice dropping low. I got a line on some international trade. Some people want to import goods into the US, but they need someone with the right connections. I figured you're in the perfect position to make it happen. It's a good market, a safe market, but it's still untapped. You're already working with Asia. This could be an easy extension of that. I folded my arms, listening carefully. I'm not in the business of jumping into anything without understanding exactly what's on the table. Tom didn't flinch. He was used to that response. He leaned back in his seat, his hands steepled in front of him. I've got contacts in Japan, Europe, and South America. People who need someone with your expertise. And I'm not talking about small-time imports. This is serious money. The kind that gets you in the door with people who can make or break your future. I let the silence hang for a moment. There were too many questions I couldn't answer yet. I had enough on my plate with rebuilding my own business, and the thought of getting involved in something this deep felt like a lot to take on. But Tom was never one to back down once he had a plan. And frankly, that kind of confidence made me hesitate. It wasn't the first time he'd suggested something risky, but the idea of legal, lucrative imports was tempting. "You're not just talking about buying and selling goods," I said slowly. "You're talking about something else, something bigger." Tom smiled, but it wasn't a friendly smile. It was calculating. "Yeah, you could say that. But don't worry, you're not going to be getting your hands dirty. I'm talking about managing the deals, setting up the logistics, and making sure everything goes smoothly. You handle the business side. I'll take care of the rest." "Why me?" I asked, still skeptical. "You could go to anyone with experience in imports. Why bring me into this?" Tom leaned in again, his voice dropping even lower. "Because you're not just anyone. You've got the reputation, you've got the connections, you've got the leverage, and most importantly, you're a survivor. People like that, people who know how to come back from the worst, they're hard to find, and they're valuable." I was quiet for a moment, considering. There was truth to what he said. I had been through the grinder, more times than I cared to count, but somehow I kept coming out the other side. Maybe that was the kind of person Tom needed for this deal. Or maybe he just saw an opportunity and was trying to make it work for him. Either way, I wasn't the kind to shy away from a challenge. "All right," I said finally. "Let's hear more. What's your angle? What are we looking at here?" Tom's eyes lit up. "That's the spirit," he said, and launched into the details of his proposition. By the time the meeting was over, I wasn't sure where this would go, but I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't going to be a small deal. It would be big, and it would either make me or break me. And something about the risk called to me. Maybe it was the fact that I'd spent the last few months rebuilding, and the thought of another challenge, another battle, felt invigorating. I shook Tom's hand as I stood to leave. "I'll think about it," I said, my mind already racing with possibilities. "I know you will," Tom replied with a grin, "but I'll be here when you're ready." The walk back to my car felt different than usual. I wasn't thinking about the business, or the kids, or even the fight with Derek. No, this time my mind was consumed with the idea of something new. Something that could either propel me forward or drag me down. I wasn't sure which, but at this point, I was used to living with uncertainty. As I started the engine and drove away from the diner, I realized something. Life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected it. And right now, I was waiting for the next one to hit. Tom was already at Red's when I arrived, sitting in the same booth Robert had used months ago. He had coffee and was reading something on his phone. "Sit," he said. I sat. "I'll cut to it. I'm moving into security consulting, high-end stuff, personal protection, threat assessment, that kind of thing. I need a business partner who knows how to run operations, handle the paperwork, manage clients." "Why me?" "Because you're smart, because you don't panic, because you just took your company back from your own kids, which means you've got steel in your spine." "I've got a company to run. So hire a manager. You've done it before." "And split my time between two businesses. Why not? This one's smaller, less overhead, but the margins are incredible. I've got 3 clients lined up already. Corporate executives mostly. 1 politician." I thought about it. The old me would have said no immediately. Too risky, too far from my comfort zone. But the old me was gone. "What's the split?" I asked. 60-40. I handle operations, you handle business. Fair?" 50-50, or I'm not interested." He smiled. "Knew you'd say that. Done." We shook hands across the table. He pulled out a folder and slid it over. "Contracts for the first 3 clients. Look them over. If you're good with the terms, we start next month." I took the folder home and spent the evening reviewing it. The numbers were solid. The terms were clean. By midnight, I'd made my decision. I called Tom. "I'm in." "Good man. Welcome to the security business." We hung up and I sat there in my quiet apartment, wondering what I'd just agreed to. But wondering felt better than regretting, so I went to bed and slept soundly. A year passed. Then 2. The business grew. Tom's venture expanded to 7 clients, then 12. We hired 3 full-time staff and 2 part-timers. The money was excellent, the work interesting, and I found myself energized in ways I hadn't been in decades. Jenna's payments came every month, never late, never with a note. Derek's too. After 18 months, they'd paid back half the $42,000. After 24 months, 3/4. I never acknowledged the payments, just watched the numbers in my account grow. I saw Jenna once, accidentally, at a grocery store. She was in the produce section, picking through apples. She looked thinner, older. She saw me and froze. We stared at each other across a display of oranges. Then she turned and walked away. I finished my shopping and left. That night, I thought about calling her. I picked up my phone 3 times and put it down 3 times. Some distances can't be crossed, even if you want to. Derek sent an email in the 3rd year. Subject line, conversation. I deleted it without reading. Robert checked in every few months. We'd meet for coffee or lunch, talk business, occasionally reminisce about the old days. He never asked about the kids, and I never volunteered. "You seem different," he said one afternoon. We were at a bistro downtown, eating sandwiches. "How so?" "Lighter, like you're not carrying as much weight." "Maybe I'm not." "Good. Physically, mentally. Better to cut it loose." "Even if it's family?" "Especially if it's family. Family can hurt you worse because they know exactly where to cut." He wasn't wrong. The final payment came on a Tuesday morning, in March, 3 years and 2 months after the settlement. $10,000 deposited electronically, the last of Jenna's debt. Derek's final payment hit the next day. $42,000, repaid in full. I sat at my desk and stared at the transaction records, all those years of them owing me, of me chasing them, of the resentment building like sediment. Now it was done. I waited for relief, for satisfaction, for something. What I felt was nothing. Patricia called that afternoon. "Saw the payments clear. Congratulations." "Thanks. What are you going to do now?" "What do you mean?" "I mean you won. You got everything back. Company, building, money. What comes next?" I didn't have an answer. That night, I stood on my balcony with a beer and watched the city. The river reflected the lights like it always did. Traffic hummed on the bridges. Somewhere out there, Derek and Jenna were living their lives, reduced and humbled, but still going. And I was here, victorious and alone. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Hello? Dad?" Jenna's voice. I hadn't heard it in 3 years. "Jenna?" "I just sent the last payment." I saw. Silence. I could hear her breathing, uneven and nervous. "I wanted to say something," she continued. I don't know what I wanted to say." "Then why call?" "Because it's done. Because we paid you back. Because maybe—" She stopped. Started again. "Because I need you to know that I understand. What we did. What it cost you." "Do you?" "I'm trying to." More silence. I waited. "We were terrible," she said finally. "Entitled and stupid and cruel. And you were right to fight back. You were right about everything." "That doesn't fix it." "I know. I'm not asking it to. I wanted you to know." "Okay. Okay. Okay, I know now." She laughed, sharp and bitter. "That's it? 3 years of silence, and that's all you have to say?" "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. That you forgive us? That we can fix this? Something." "I can't give you that." "Can't or won't?" "Both. Same thing." I heard her crying, soft sounds she was trying to muffle. "I miss you," she whispered. "Derek does too, even if he won't say it. We miss having a father." "You had one. You pushed him out." "We know. God, we know. And we're sorry. Doesn't that count for something?" I thought about it, really thought about it. about the Thanksgiving dinner that started everything, about the slap at the wedding, about 3 years of silence and the slow rebuilding of my life from wreckage they'd created. Maybe someday, I said, but not today. When? I don't know. Will you at least think about it? I'll think about it. That's all I'm asking. We hung up. I stood there with the phone in my hand, looking out at the city that had witnessed everything. My rise, my fall, my return. The beer had gone warm. I poured it over the railing and went inside. 6 months after Jenna's call, I sold the company. Not to Derek and Jenna, to a competitor who'd been circling for years, offering increasingly generous terms. The final offer was substantial, more than enough to retire on twice over. I accepted and signed the papers on a Friday afternoon in September. Linda cried when I told the staff. What are we supposed to do? The new owner is keeping everyone. Same positions, same salaries. You'll be fine. But what about you? I'm done. It's time. I cleaned out my office that weekend. 22 years of accumulated possessions fit into 4 boxes. Diplomas, awards, photos of handshakes with clients. I threw most of it away and kept 1 box of essentials. Tom's security business had grown enough to occupy my time. We'd expanded into corporate training, running seminars on threat assessment and crisis management. I enjoyed the work, enjoyed being semi-retired, enjoyed the freedom of not carrying a company on my shoulders. You sure about this? Tom asked when I told him about the sale. Completely. No regrets? Not one. He nodded. Good, because I need you focused. We've got a big contract coming up, government work. How big? 7 figures, big. Interested? Tell me more. We spent the afternoon going over details. The work was legitimate, the money real. By the time we finished, I'd committed to another 3 years minimum. That night, I went to Red's Diner alone. Sat in the same booth where I'd met Robert, where I'd met Tom. Ordered coffee and pie and watched the city through the window. A woman slid into the booth across from me. Sarah. Thought I'd find you here, she said. How'd you know? I've known you for 30 years. You always come here when you need to think. She looked good. Older, yes, but healthy, happy even. I heard you sold the company, she said. News travels fast. The kids told me. You talk to them. Every week. They're doing better. Derek's working for a tech startup. Jenna's consulting. Good for them. She studied me across the table. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd done things differently? If I hadn't asked for the divorce? If you hadn't put the company in the trust? Every day. And I still would have ended up here. Maybe by a different road, but here all the same. Alone? By choice. She nodded slowly. They want to see you, both of them. They've been asking me to reach out. That why you're here? Partly. Also because I wanted to see if you were okay. I'm fine. Are you? I thought about it, really thought about it. Yeah, I am. Then maybe it's time to let them try. Why? So they can apologize again, so we can have awkward dinners and pretend the last 5 years didn't happen. So you can stop punishing them. And yourself. That hit harder than I expected. I looked down at my coffee, suddenly not thirsty. I'm not punishing anyone. Aren't you? You got everything back, the money, the company, your dignity, but you're still angry. I have a right to be angry. You do, but is it making you happy? I didn't answer. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand, brief and warm. Think about it, she said. Then she left, leaving me alone with my cold coffee and half-eaten pie. I didn't call them, not that week or the next, but I thought about it, about Sarah's words, about Jenna's phone call, about the weight I was carrying that Robert had warned me about. 3 weeks later, I got a package. No return address, but I recognized Derek's handwriting. Inside was a photo album, old pictures from when the kids were young, birthday parties, Christmas mornings, summer vacations. Me pushing Jenna on a swing, Derek on my shoulders at a parade. The four of us, me, Sarah, and the kids, on a beach somewhere, all of us smiling. At the back was a note in Derek's handwriting. We can't undo what we did. We can't give you back the years we stole or the pain we caused. But we want you to know that we remember who you were before we broke you, and we're sorry we forgot. I sat in my apartment with the album in my lap for a long time. The sun set. The lights came on across the river. My phone rang twice and I didn't answer. Finally, I picked up the phone and called Derek. He answered on the first ring. "Dad? I got your package. And thank you." Silence. Then, "Does this mean—" "No, it doesn't mean forgiveness. It doesn't mean we go back to how things were. But it means I'll think about it. That's all we're asking." "Good, because that's all I can give." We hung up. I put the album on the shelf next to my other box of possessions. Maybe someday I'd look through it again. Maybe someday I'd call them back and suggest coffee, something neutral and safe. But not today. Today I had Tom's government contract to review. I had a business to run. I had a life I'd rebuilt from ashes and betrayal, and it was mine. Every piece of it. I stood on my balcony one last time, looking at the city that had given me everything and taken it away and let me claw it back. The river flowed beneath the bridges, endless and uncaring. Traffic hummed, lights flickered. Somewhere out there, my children were living their reduced lives, learning lessons I'd been too soft to teach them earlier. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably worrying about all of us. Somewhere out there, Robert was closing deals, and Tom was intimidating people, and Patricia was billing hours. And I was here, 58 years old, alone but not lonely, angry but not bitter, scarred but not broken. I'd won, not in the way I'd imagined, not with reconciliation or redemption or healing, but I'd won. I'd taken back what was mine and made them pay for taking it. I'd stood up when it would have been easier to lie down. I'd fought when it would have been simpler to surrender. That was enough. It had to be enough. I finished my beer, went inside, and closed the door on the view. Tomorrow, I'd start the government contract review. Tomorrow, I'd think about maybe calling the kids back. Tomorrow, I'd figure out what came next. But tonight, I'd sleep soundly for the first time in 6 years, knowing I'd done what needed doing, knowing I'd survived, knowing that sometimes the only justice you get is the justice you take for yourself. The last payback wasn't about revenge. It was about respect, about boundaries, about teaching people that you can't steal from someone forever without consequences. They'd learned. I'd made sure of that. And I was done teaching.